Hi everyone, welcome to Tech Talks. Today we're here to talk about signs you are not an FJ.
So the first sign we're going to discuss is you are a highly independent thinker. So FJs can have some independent thoughts, and that tends to be important to an FJ. But overall, an FJ is not usually going to define themselves as being a highly independent thinker. They are influenced by the group and by the emotions around them, and so that is always going to influence an FJ. Other types can be highly independent thinkers across the board.
This doesn't mean that these types can't be independent. They surely are. But when it comes to fully trusting and having a mind of their own, they can doubt their logic. So FJs, although they have a TI and mind of their own, they may doubt their own opinions, especially if it goes against what other people think. It might lead them into this realm of feeling torn or thinking that they might actually have the wrong opinion and being like, oh, maybe there's something that I didn't consider yet, because you're so tuned into other people's feelings that you can feel how they feel about their opinion. And it can be a very big swaying point. And so FJs deal with a lot of self-doubt when it comes to fully trusting 100% into their logic. With TI tertiaries, they can feel a stable sense in their own way of thinking, but there is also a group sway. There might be some hesitancy or doubt because you're considering the group's emotions too.
Yeah, and then if you're not an FJ and you are a highly independent thinker, that's a strength for you, then oftentimes the group beliefs are only your beliefs if you actually agree. Right? So you're going to have some pretty strong convictions, potentially, if you're not an FJ, if you're another type. So maybe if you have TI or FI as a strength, your beliefs are your beliefs. And sometimes the group can't sway that in any way. Completely opposite of that, maybe you have actually a strong aversion to being defined by others. So both FE and TE, we haven't been discussing TE, but both of those really seek group feedback and group calibration. And so if you're someone who's really averse to that in any way, you're probably not an FJ. That's not to say that FJs don't have their moments. FJs can sometimes get on a high horse, but it tends to be when they've thought something through a lot, or when they've gotten a lot of calibration and they really believe something, they may go against the group. So it's not that FJs never do. They absolutely do sometimes, but it's sometimes. It's not the general rule.
And so the second sign that you are not an FJ is that directness in communication is your natural go-to for interactions. This is the most common for thinking types. So types that have high TE or TI tend to be very direct and blunt with how they talk. Whereas with FJs, they're going to sugarcoat what they say in consideration with your feelings. They're going to have a more awareness of their tone when they're speaking and how it's going to impact you, how their tone is going to affect your emotions.
Yeah. And again, there are certainly moments when FJs can be extremely direct, but it tends to come in safer spaces with people that there's more familiarity, there's more of an established relationship, there's that trust in the bond. And then some of that directness may come out, or they might be super stressed and they've just been pushed to the point where it's almost like a switch flips and they become the hard thinker and they become direct. And when you're evaluating yourself and looking at some of your own behaviors, even if you are an FJ, you may see yourself being direct at times, but it's much, much less than if you're someone who has thinking as a strength rather than feeling as a strength. The other thing that would go along with this is if you're one who never backs down from a debate, right? There's a heated debate, you're going to lean in and you're going to share your own opinion. Again, that's situational, and it could happen with an FJ, but it's going to be, again, in a close circle of friends or in a more safe space where they feel safe to express those thoughts that are their own. Whereas if you're not an FJ and you just naturally share your opinion, again, probably more of a thinking preference.
Yeah. And so with extroverted feeling, you don't want preventable conflict. So it's like, well, okay, this is a disharmonious situation, and literally this conflict is seemingly unproductive. And so I don't like this unnecessary conflict that upsets people's emotions. I don't like emotional upset. And so you don't want to contribute to the fire if the fire is getting bigger too, because what you're noticing the most is the emotional impact it's having on people. And so that's going to affect how you're going to make your decision.
I think it's also interesting how FE, if it does choose to engage in debate, it will be when other people are feeling safe and okay with that. It will sacrifice its own comfort to share truths if the people engaged in that interaction are feeling comfortable. But as you said, Joyce, the minute those other people feel uncomfortable, it's not worth it and it's time to back down.
And so the third sign that you are not an FJ is that measurable goals juice you up more than positive emotional reactions from others. And so if you're a TJ, you have TE. Measurable goals really get you going. They rev you up. They make you happy. Checking things off your to-do list, meeting certain targets, getting certain goals met. They make you feel that dopamine rush. Whereas an FJ can feel that, but it's not as rewarding as it would be to get a positive emotional reaction from someone. It's the positive emotional feedback that actually gets FJs the biggest dopamine hit. And so if the happiness you get the most is from tangible goal meeting, then it might be a sign that you're using extroverted thinking.
Yeah, I think this can be a very confusing point as people are trying to figure out their best fit type, or even as people are being profiled. Goals are common. It's a common theme among extroverted judges in general, meeting goals. But what is the goal? What's juicing them up, like you said? And for the FE user, for the FJ, it's absolutely the emotional hits that they're getting from the people around them. So they may work to the bone on the to-do list and get lots of things accomplished, but really it's because they're making the people around them happier, potentially, or they're just making things easier on the people around them so that they can feel better in general. And so that brings us to our fourth point, which is you might not be an FJ if you get easily confused or frustrated even by trying to determine group needs. So again, FJs have a pretty unconscious awareness of what the group needs are. And so if that's something you struggle with, if that's something that's frustrating, like, please just tell me what you need. Why do I always have to figure out what you need? If those are questions that go through your head, you're probably not an FJ.
With FJs, other people's needs can come quite intuitively. You just understand the unmet needs around you. They're factored into your decision making. So they're not going to be super confusing to determine. It's not ninja mind games. You're naturally reflexively monitoring these needs. You have an awareness of them and you incorporate them into your decision making. And so it's going to be on the radar for you.
And depending on where FE is, again, whether it's first position, second position, dominant or auxiliary, it also kind of determines kind of the compulsivity of acting on those recognized needs. So when FE is the dominant function, you almost find yourself in action. Not almost, you do often find yourself in action meeting those needs. And you're not even aware you're doing it until you're like, oh, wow, I'm in action. Whereas I think in the second position, it's a little bit more of a choice. You're seeing it, but do you really want to act on it? You're more conscious of FE when it's second position. And so you're better able to decide whether you're going to act or not.
Well said, Diane. And so the fifth sign that you are not an FJ is that you often find yourself lost in an emotion even when you're nowhere near the source. And so this is more common with introverted feeling, where they get lost in their own emotion. It's almost like they are stuck underwater and they're not coming up for air. And so even when the emotion's not relevant to the surrounding area, FI is tuned into almost emotions of all time. And so they can feel asynchronously. It doesn't match the context that they're in. FI does feel emotions away from the source because the source is inside them. So it's not contextually linked. If you find yourself deeply in your own emotions without coming up for air to surveil the emotions around you, then that's a sign that introverted feeling might be higher up for you.
Right. Where I was just going to say for FI, the emotion that I'm feeling is the emotion that I'm feeling, and appropriateness is not relevant. I can't change how I'm feeling as an FI user, right? And I'm speaking from an FI voice. Appropriateness doesn't weigh in. Sometimes, depending on where FI is in the stack, you'll be more aware of what's appropriate and what's not, and have a little bit more ability to push it away and save it for later. But I think that that is a really good distinguishing thing. Appropriateness is really key to FE, whereas FI, not that FI is not aware of appropriateness, because certainly FI users can be very aware of appropriateness, but it doesn't change the emotion.
That wraps it up for our 5 signs you're not an FJ. Thank you, Diane. It's a delight to have you on. And thanks everyone for watching. Thanks for supporting the channel through your viewership. And I'll see you all in the next episode. Take care.
Bye.